This is not a coincidence. This is not an algorithm. This is not a random video that slipped into your screen by accident. This moment was arranged. Right now, as you are listening, something eternal is leaning toward you. There is a weight in the air you cannot explain, a quiet pressure in your spirit that tells you this message is different. And the reason is simple and terrifying at the same time. Jesus is crying. Not because he is weak, not because he has lost control. He is crying because he is trying to reach you right now, before something closes, before something shifts, before a door that has stayed open longer than it should finally shuts. You may feel the urge to scroll. You may feel distracted, uncomfortable, even resisted. That is not random either. The title warned you for a reason. This message is only for you, not for everyone, not for the crowd, not for those who are half listening. It is for the one who almost skipped, the one who said, "I'll come back later," the one who felt a pull in the chest and tried to ignore it. Heaven is speaking in urgency because time is thinner than you think. Jesus is not crying out of anger. He is crying out of love that has been ignored too many times. Love that has called your name in silence. Love that waited while you healed, while you ran, while you doubted, while you postponed obedience. And now that love is speaking louder, because what is coming next is not neutral. It will either move you closer to him or further away. There is no middle ground in moments like this. You were not meant to hear this at another time. You were meant to hear it now. Right now. Before the next few minutes unfold. Because the next few minutes matter more than you realize. Decisions are not always dramatic. Sometimes they look like staying. Sometimes they look like listening. Sometimes they look like not skipping, not minimizing, not brushing off what feels uncomfortable. And that is why the warning is sharp. If you skip even for 1 second, you will lose him forever. Not because he stops loving you, but because you train your heart to stop responding. There are moments when God whispers, and there are moments when he weeps. This is the second kind. Jesus is reaching because something in your life is at a crossroads. You may not see it yet. You may not feel the full weight of it. But heaven does. And heaven does not panic without reason. The tears of Jesus are not symbolic here. They are personal. They are directed. They are aimed at you. You might ask, why would Jesus cry over me? Because he sees what you were created to carry. He sees the calling you keep postponing. He sees the surrender you keep negotiating. He sees the pattern of almost obeying, almost trusting, almost returning. And he knows that almost is dangerous. Almost has cost more souls than rebellion ever did. This is why the message feels intense. This is why it feels like a line is being drawn. Because it is. There are moments when God allows people to drift. And there are moments when he interrupts the drift. This is an interruption. A holy one. A painful one. A loving one. And it comes with urgency because delay is not harmless. Delay is a decision in disguise. Jesus is crying because he knows what happens next if you do nothing. He knows the distractions that are waiting. He knows the numbness that slowly settles in. He knows how easy it becomes to silence his voice once you choose to ignore it. And he is trying to reach you before silence feels normal. This message is not here to scare you. It is here to wake you. Shock is sometimes mercy. Urgency is sometimes grace. The title did not exaggerate. What's coming in the next few minutes will shock you, not because it is dramatic, but because it is true. Because truth is a way of cutting through excuses. Because truth reveals what has been hidden in plain sight. You are not weak for feeling overwhelmed by this. You are not broken for feeling exposed. That reaction is proof that something in you is still alive, still sensitive, still reachable. And that is why Jesus is crying. Because he can still reach you. Because you are not beyond hope yet. Because you are not lost yet. Because you are still listening. But hear this clearly. Moments like this do not repeat endlessly. There are warnings that come only once. Invitations that do not knock forever. Tears that are not always followed by another chance. Love is patient, yes, but patience is not permission to delay. So before anything else is revealed, before anything else is said, understand this foundation. You are standing in a now moment. A divine interruption. A personal call. And the reason it feels heavy is because eternity is brushing against your present. Jesus is crying because he loves you enough to warn you. And he is trying to reach you right now, while you still can. If you are still here, it is not because you are curious. It is because something deeper inside you recognized its own name being called. Out of thousands, this message found you. Out of endless noise, this voice cut through. That alone should stop you. Heaven does not waste precision. God does not broadcast Inuit warnings to the raw heart. You were targeted, not by accident, not by chance, but by divine intention. This is personal. There is a reason this message feels like it is speaking directly into your private thoughts. A reason it feels uncomfortably accurate. You may have told yourself that you are fine, that you will return to faith later, that you will fix things when life calms down. But calm seasons are not what shape destiny. Crisis moments do. Decision moments do. And this is one of them. You are here because something in your spirit has been avoiding a conversation it knows it must have. Jesus is not calling you because you are perfect. He is calling you because you are chosen and conflicted at the same time. Because you believe, but not fully surrendered. Because you pray, but still control. Because you feel his pull, but resist his timing. And that tension inside you is exactly why this message locked onto your life. You have been delaying something you already understand. Not because you don't know what God wants, but because you are afraid of what obedience will cost you. Afraid of letting go. Afraid of being misunderstood. Afraid of changing direction when people already expect a certain version of you. Heaven sees that fear, and instead of condemning you, it reached for you. This is how divine targeting works. God does not always shout. Sometimes he corners you with truth you can't escape. Sometimes he sends a message that feels like it was written with your fingerprints on it. Sometimes he reaches you when you least expect it, because he knows if he waited for you to feel ready, you never would. You may wonder why now. Why today? Why this exact moment? Because something has been forming behind the scenes. A shift. A consequence, an opportunity, a loss, a breakthrough, something that responds directly to your next decision. Heaven does not interrupt lives without reason. When God presses urgency, it is because delay would cost more than obedience. You are not being rushed to pray you. You are being rushed to protect you. There is a difference. The enemy pushes you into panic. God pulls you into clarity. And clarity often arrives with intensity because truth does not whisper when eternity is involved. Notice how your heart is reacting right now. Adayanu. The awareness. The sense that you are being seen. That is not emotional manipulation. That is recognition. Your spirit recognizes the voice that formed it. And even if your mind argues, your soul already knows this is real. This message did not find someone stronger than you. It found someone willing to listen. Someone who still has a soft place inside, even if it is buried under disappointment, exhaustion, or guilt. And that is why this moment matters. Because responsiveness is rarer than perfection, and heaven always responds to responsiveness. Now hear this carefully, because this is where your participation matters. Messages like this do not just ask to be heard, they ask to be acknowledged. When truth touches you, response seals it. Silence leaks it away. That is why action matters, not as a performance, but as alignment. If this message is speaking to you, if something inside you is stirring, do not keep it hidden. Let this moment mark you. Pause and like this video, not as a habit, but as a signal that you are choosing awareness over avoidance. Share it if you know someone else standing at a similar crossroads, because obedience multiplies when it moves outward. Subscribe to the channel so you stay connected to what God continues to unfold, not because of content, but because consistency keeps hearts open. And write a comment, not for visibility, but as a witness that says, I hear this. Heaven honors acknowledgement. These actions are not about a platform. They are about positioning. When you align outwardly, you reinforce inwardly. When you respond publicly, you strengthen privately. And in moments like this, even small steps matter more than you realize. You were targeted because God trusts you with truth, because He knows you are capable of responding, because He sees the version of you that exists on the other side of surrender. And that version is not weaker, it is freer. Not smaller, clearer. Not lost, anchored. This is not the part where everything is revealed yet. This is the part where your heart is being prepared, where resistance is being softened, where excuses are being stripped of their comfort. Because what comes next requires honesty. And honesty begins with admitting that this message reached you for a reason. You are here. You stayed. And that alone already separates you from who you were minutes ago. Something has shifted. Something has been acknowledged. And heaven is watching what you do next. This is where time becomes visible, not measured in seconds, but in sensitivity. There is a silent countdown happening right now, and you would never hear it with your ears. It happens in the spirit. It happens when truth reaches you and waits for response. Heaven pauses, not because God is unsure, but because He is allowing you the dignity of choice. And that pause is dangerous if misunderstood. Most people do not lose God in rebellion. They lose Him in hesitation, in the quiet decision to delay, in the subtle thought that says, I'll deal with this later. Later feels harmless. Later feels responsible. Later feels safe. But later is often the moment where clarity dissolves, conviction fades, urgency weakens, and what once felt alive becomes distant. Jesus warned about this without using dramatic language. He spoke of hearts growing dull, of ears that no longer hear, of eyes that no longer see. Not because truth disappeared, but because people trained themselves to ignore it. The training begins with hesitation. One pause, one skipped moment, one decision to look away when heaven is leaning in. Right now, something is being measured, not by God, but by what you choose to do with awareness. Awareness is a gift. It is also a responsibility. When you become aware of truth, you are no longer neutral. You either respond to it or you resist it. And resistance does not always look like refusal. Sometimes it looks like delay wrapped in logic. This is the part no one likes to talk about. Silence after conviction is not neutral ground. It is erosion. Slowly, quietly, without drama, something wears down. The voice that once stirred you becomes easier to ignore. The discomfort that once pressed you becomes manageable. And that is how people drift without realizing they move. You may feel right now like something is at stake, but you can't fully explain what. That feeling is accurate. Something is at stake. Not God's love. His love is constant. What is at stake is access, intimacy, sensitivity, the closeness that comes from responding quickly when He speaks. Every relationship is shaped by responsiveness. The Divine One is no different. This is why hesitation matters more than people think. When Jesus reaches and you pause, heaven notices. Not to condemn you, but because pauses form patterns. Patterns form habits. Habits shape hearts. And hearts determine direction. You have probably experienced this before. A moment when God nudged you. A clear sense to pray, to stop, to forgive, to change direction. And you said later. Nothing terrible happened immediately. Life continued. But something shifted. Prayer felt quieter. Conviction felt weaker. And returning felt harder than it should have been. That is not imagination. That is spiritual consequence. This is not said to frighten you. It is said to wake you. You are in a rare moment where awareness is still sharp, where your heart is still responding, where this message still feels heavy. That heaviness is mercy. It means you are still sensitive. It means the countdown has not reached 0 yet. But understand this, sensitivity is not permanent if ignored. It is preserved by response. The more you answer God when He speaks, the clearer His voice becomes. The more you delay, the quieter it feels, not because He stopped speaking, but because you stopped tuning in. This is why the warning feels intense. Because moments like this do not linger. They pass. And when they pass, people often don't realize what they lost until much later. They just know something feels distant. Something feels muted. Something feels harder than before. Right now, you are not being asked to understand everything. You are being asked to stay present. To not retreat into distraction. To not minimize what is happening inside you. To allow this moment to do its work. This is a threshold moment. Not dramatic on the outside, but deeply significant on the inside. And thresholds are crossed by movement, not intention. Desire alone does not carry you through. Response does. Before anything else is revealed, let this settle. Hesitation is not harmless. It shapes the future quietly, and responsiveness shapes it boldly. You are still here because the door is still open. But doors are not open forever. Receive this blessing now, because it marks this moment as sacred. Type "I am awakened" in the comments if this is touching your spirit. Blessing code 913 is now activated over your sensitivity, your hearing, and your obedience. And hold this in your heart as you continue, because what comes next will bring clarity you did not expect. You will be glad you stayed for what is about to be revealed. This moment you just felt is a seed falling into open soil. And seeds are meant to be sown, not stored. When you support this mission, you are helping light reach souls who are still in darkness, hearts that are still waiting for their wake-up call. The Word says God gives seed to the sower, and right now He is speaking directly to you, inviting you to move. I feel led to tell you this. Your obedience in giving becomes oil in someone else's midnight. Do not miss this prophetic moment by hesitating again. Release your support now through Super Thanks, membership, or PayPal. The links are in the description, and the PayPal QR code is appearing on your screen. I speak blessing over every giver, that what you sow in faith will return as clarity, peace, and divine acceleration. Act now, and let heaven respond. When you hear that Jesus is crying, your mind may picture weakness, sadness, or defeat. But that image is incomplete. The tears of Jesus are not the tears of someone who has lost authority. They are the tears of someone who sees what is about to be lost if nothing changes. Here is a profound difference. His tears are not about his pain alone. They are about your future. Throughout Scripture, tears appear at turning points. They show up before destruction and before deliverance. They show up when mercy is extended one last time. Jesus wept not because he lacked power, but because power was being rejected. He wept because hearts were closed while help was standing right in front of them. That same pattern is unfolding here, quietly, personally, without an audience. These tears are not meant to make you feel guilty. Guilt pushes people away. Love pulls them closer. The grief you sense in this moment is love grieving potential loss. It is heaven looking at what could be, and what may not be, depending on what you choose next. That is why the emotion feels heavy but not hateful, serious but not cruel. Jesus cries because he sees beyond the surface of your life. He sees the parts no one else sees. The prayers you stopped praying because you felt tired. The faith you tucked away because disappointment made it feel safer to expect less. The calling you negotiated down into something smaller so it wouldn't cost you as much. None of that disqualified you, but it did place you at risk of settling. There is a holy grief when divine potential is delayed too long. Not anger, grief. Like watching someone you love choose something lesser when something greater is within reach. Like seeing someone turn away not because they hate you, but because they are afraid of what closeness requires. Jesus' tears mean you still matter deeply. They mean your story is still being contended for. They mean heaven has not given up on you, even if you have grown used to holding God at a distance. Tears appear when love is still invested. Silence comes when it is no longer pursued. That is why this moment is serious. Tears are the language of urgency when words alone are no longer enough. And these tears are falling because something is about to change, either in you or around you. Change is coming. The only question is whether it will feel like rescue or regret. Many people misunderstand mercy. They think mercy means endless delay, endless patience, endless postponement of consequence. But mercy often looks like warning, like interruption, like discomfort that refuses to let you stay numb. Mercy shakes you awake before loss becomes permanent. The tears of Jesus are mercy in motion. They are saying, I see what you don't. I see what's forming. I see the door narrowing. I see the cost of waiting. And because he sees it, he reaches for you now, not later. You might feel exposed listening to this, like something private has been named without details. That exposure is not accusation. It is clarity. When light enters a room, it doesn't shame the darkness. It replaces it. What you are feeling is light pressing in. Understand this clearly. These tears do not mean you are too late. They mean you are almost late. And there is a difference. Almost late is still time. Almost late is still opportunity. Almost late is still mercy reaching before finality. Jesus is not standing far away watching. He is close enough to be heard, close enough to be felt, close enough that his grief reaches you before the outcome is sealed. That closeness itself is a gift, but closeness also demands honesty. You cannot stay hidden and healed at the same time. You cannot protect your comfort and receive transformation. Tears appear at the edge of surrender because surrender is where resistance finally breaks. Ask yourself quietly, without defending yourself, what have you been avoiding? Not publicly, internally. What conversation with God have you delayed? What obedience have you rebranded as not the right time? What step have you kept at arm's length because it threatens your sense of control? Jesus is crying because he sees how small the distance is between you and the life you were meant to live. And he also sees how easy it would be for you to turn away again if nothing interrupts you now. These tears are not meant to overwhelm you. They are meant to soften you, to remind you that love is still reaching, that heaven is still invested, that the door is still open, but not casually open. This part of the message is meant to slow you down, to let the weight of his love land, before warnings intensify, before revelations unfold, before choices become unavoidable. Let this truth settle. Tears are not the end of the story. They are the appeal before the turning point. And you are standing at that turning point now, with awareness in your hands. What comes next will build on this, and it will require honesty you may not have expected. But for now, stay with this moment. Let it do its work. Because tears do not fall where love has given up. They fall where love still hopes. There is a reason the warning speaks of 1 second, not an hour, not a day. 1 second. Because spiritual loss rarely announces itself with noise. It slips in through what seems insignificant. A pause, a glance away, a moment where you almost respond, but don't. That is how eternal things are traded for temporary comfort without anyone noticing. 1 second is enough to look away. 1 second is enough to scroll. 1 second is enough to silence a nudge you were meant to follow. And over time, those seconds accumulate into distance. Distance turns into unfamiliarity. And unfamiliarity turns into separation that feels natural instead of tragic. This is why the danger is not dramatic rebellion. It is subtle drift. The kind that feels reasonable. The kind that sounds like wisdom. The kind that says, "I'll come back to this later," without realizing later is not guarantee. Later is an assumption, not a promise. Jesus spoke often about this kind of loss, not in threats but in parables. Seeds that were sown but never rooted. Lamps that ran out of oil. Invitations that were declined because life felt busy. None of those people thought they were rejecting God. They thought they were postponing him. And that was the danger. The tragedy is not that they said no. It is that they said not now. 1 second matters because moments of clarity are fragile. They do not linger indefinitely. When truth comes near, it asks for attention. When attention is withheld, truth withdraws, not in anger, but in respect for your choice. God does not force intimacy. He honors response. That is why delay has weight. Delay trains your heart to believe that urgency is optional. And once urgency feels optional, obedience becomes negotiable. You begin to bargain with God using logic, timing, and self-protection. And slowly, the sharpness of his voice dulls. People often think losing God looks like walking away in anger or disbelief. But more often, it looks like drifting into comfort, into routine, into self-sufficiency. You still believe. You still remember. You just don't respond the way you used to. And over time, that non-response becomes a wall. 1 second is enough to reinforce that wall. Think back to moments when you felt clearly guided. Moments when something inside you said, "This is important." And you hesitated. Nothing exploded. Nothing collapsed immediately. Life went on. What something shifted. The clarity faded. The urgency softened. And returning to that same level of closeness felt harder than it should have. That is not imagination. That is how spiritual sensitivity works. It is maintained through obedience, not intention. Desire alone does not preserve closeness. Response does. The danger of 1 second is that it convinces you nothing was lost. But loss does not always announce itself. Sometimes it reveals itself later, when you try to pray and feel distance, when you seek direction and feel fog, when you remember a time God felt near and wonder when that changed, and changed quietly, in seconds. This is why the warning is severe, not because God is harsh, but because reality is honest. Spiritual doors do not slam shut loudly. They narrow. They grow heavy. They become harder to open each time you hesitate. You are not being told this to make you anxious. You are being told this to make you aware. Awareness is protection. It gives you the chance to choose differently before patterns harden. Right now, you are in a moment where the door is still open, where awareness is still present, where this message still feels weighty. That means you are not too late. But it also means you are close enough to the edge that delay would matter. The enemy of your soul does not need you to reject God. He only needs you to delay long enough that responsiveness fades. That is why distraction feels strong right now. That is why part of you wants relief from this tension. Because tension means decision. And decision threatens comfort. But comfort is not neutral. Comfort that keeps you from obedience becomes a substitute God. It promises safety but slowly steals clarity. And clarity is what keeps you close to God. 1 second is dangerous because it is the smallest unit of avoidance. It feels harmless, but it trains your reflex. And reflexes shape destiny more than intentions ever do. You may not realize how much is hinging on moments like this. How many futures are altered by small choices made consistently. Heaven sees the long arc. It sees what one delayed response can turn into over years. And that is why heaven warns early, not late. This message is not saying you are lost. It is saying loss is possible if patterns continue. And patterns are formed right now in how you respond to discomfort, conviction, and truth. Do not underestimate the power of staying present, of listening when it would be easier to disengage, of letting this moment complete its work instead of rushing past it. 1 second can be the difference between drifting and turning back, between dullness and sensitivity, between distance and closeness. You are still here because you have not crossed that line. But lines are crossed quietly, 1 second at a time. And awareness is your invitation to choose differently. What comes next will reveal more. But this truth must settle first. Small delays carry eternal weight. And staying attentive right now matters more than you know. Before the warnings, before the tears, before the urgency, there was intention. Long before you ever questioned your direction, heaven placed something specific inside you. Not vague goodness. Not generic purpose. Something precise. Something that fits your nature, your story, your sensitivity, and even your wounds. You were meant to receive something that cannot be handed to just anyone. And that is why resistance has followed you for so long. What you were meant to receive is not merely a blessing. It is a responsibility wrapped in grace. It is clarity where confusion once lived. Authority where fear once spoke louder. Peace that does not depend on circumstances behaving. And direction that does not collapse when uncertainty appears. This is not about success as the world defines it. It is about alignment. And alignment changes everything. Many people assume that if God wants to give something, it will arrive automatically. But Scripture and life both show a different pattern. What is promised still requires reception, and reception requires openness. What you were meant to receive has been waiting on a posture, not perfection. Waiting on surrender, not strength. There are things God does not release into resistant hands, not as punishment, but as protection. Some gifts would overwhelm you if given too early. Some clarity would frighten you if revealed before you were willing to let go of control. And so heaven waits, patiently, graciously, but not passively. You have felt this before. That sense that there is more, that something is missing, not because you lack effort, but because you are out of alignment. You try to fix it externally, new plans, new habits, new distractions, but the unease remains. Because what you are longing for is not external at all. It is what you were meant to receive internally first. You were meant to receive a settled spirit, one that does not constantly wrestle with doubt. You were meant to receive confidence that is quiet, not loud. You were meant to receive discernment that helps you recognize what to release and what to pursue. And you were meant to receive courage, not the absence of fear, but the willingness to obey even when fear speaks. These things do not come through effort alone. They come through surrender. And surrender is not passive. It is an active decision to stop negotiating with God about timing, cost, and outcome. This is where many people stall. They want the gift without the letting go, the peace without the trust, the clarity without the obedience. But the order matters. Heaven does not rearrange the order to accommodate fear. It invites you to step forward so the next thing can be placed in your hands. Jesus often told people, "Your faith has made you well." Not because faith was magical, but because faith positioned them to receive what was already available. The healing was present. The restoration was ready. The breakthrough was near. But reception required movement. What you were meant to receive has not disappeared. It has been delayed by resistance, not removed by rejection. That distinction matters. Delay can be reversed. Removal is final. And right now, you are still in the space where reversal is possible. Think honestly about what you have been holding back. Not what others see, but what you know. The thing you have half surrendered. The obedience you have partially obeyed. The direction you have acknowledged but not followed. That is not where God is angry. That is where God is waiting. You were meant to receive more than relief. You were meant to receive transformation. Relief changes how you feel. Transformation changes who you are. And transformation requires a deeper yes than comfort ever will. This part of the message is not meant to pressure you. It is meant to clarify what is at stake. When you delay obedience, you do not just delay blessings, you delay becoming who you were meant to be. And that is a heavier cost than most people realize. There is a version of you that exists on the other side of surrender that you have not met yet. That version is not perfect, but it is aligned. Not fearless, but anchored. Not false, but free from constant inner conflict. That version of you is not imaginary. It is the natural result of receiving what heaven has been holding. But that reception cannot happen while you keep one hand clenched. God fills open hands, not guarded ones. And the opening of your hand is not about loss. It is about exchange. You let go of control. You receive peace. You let go of delay. You receive clarity. You let go of resistance. You receive direction. Nothing is wasted in this exchange. Only replaced. This is why this moment matters so much. Because what you were meant to receive is still within reach, but reach requires movement. Awareness alone is not enough. Emotion alone is not enough. Staying present is good, but eventually presence must become response. What comes next will challenge you to see what has been blocking that reception. Not to shame you, but to free you. Because heaven is not withholding from you. It is waiting for you. And you are closer than you think. There is a reason resistance intensifies right when clarity begins to form. It is not coincidence. It is strategy. Whenever heaven draws near, distraction follows. Whenever truth sharpens, noise multiplies. This is not because you are weak. It is because what is happening matters more than you realize. The enemy does not need to destroy you. He only needs to keep you distracted long enough that you miss the moment. Distraction is subtle. It does not feel like attack. It feels like relief. Like escape, like logic stepping into calm spiritual tension. But beneath that relief is a calculated intention to pull your attention away from what is trying to take root. Right now, distraction may show up as restlessness, as the urge to check something else, as sudden thoughts about tasks, responsibilities, or worries that feel urgent, as a quiet voice that says, "You've heard enough. You can come back later." That voice is not neutral. It is timed. This is how the enemy works. He does not always oppose truth directly. He dilutes it. He surrounds it with enough noise that it loses its edge. He waits until the moment feels intense, then offers comfort as an alternative to obedience. And comfort feels kind. But comfort at the wrong time becomes a trap. You may notice your mind trying to analyze instead of receive, to critique instead of listen, to distance instead of engage. That is not wisdom. That is defense. Defense against vulnerability. Defense against surrender. Defense against change. Distraction often disguises itself as self-protection. It says, "This is too much. You need a break." But what it really means is, if you stay present, something will have to change. And change threatens the version of you that has learned to survive without full surrender. The enemy knows something important. If you fully hear this message, you cannot remain the same. Awareness demands response. And response breaks patterns that have been carefully maintained. That is why distraction escalates right before breakthrough. Not because breakthrough is guaranteed, but because it is possible. Think about how many times you have felt close to a shift, only to be pulled away by something small. A conversation, a notification, a sudden doubt. Over time, those interruptions train you to associate spiritual intensity with discomfort and distraction with relief. And eventually, you learn to escape moments that were meant to change you. This is not accidental. It is learned behavior. And it can be unlearned, but only if you recognize it. Jesus often withdrew from noise before pivotal moments. Not because noise was evil, but because focus was necessary. He understood that clarity requires stillness, and stillness threatens systems built on chaos. The principle still applies. When you become still inside, lies lose their grip. Distraction keeps you from stillness. It keeps you reacting instead of reflecting, moving instead of listening. And as long as you are reacting, you are not choosing. You are being led. Notice how distraction feels urgent but produces nothing lasting. It demands attention, but gives no fruit. It fills time but empties clarity. That is how you know it is not from God. God may challenge you, but He never leaves you emptier than before. Another tactic of distraction is emotional numbness. When intensity rises, numbness offers an escape. You stop feeling deeply. You stop engaging fully. You become neutral. And neutrality feels safe. But neutrality is not safety. It is stagnation. The enemy loves neutrality because it looks harmless. You are not rejecting God. You are not rebelling. You are just unmoved, unbothered, unresponsive. And over time, unresponsive becomes unreachable. This is why you must be alert right now. Not fearful, but aware. Awareness is the antidote to distraction. When you name it, it loses power. When you see it, it can no longer quietly steer you. Ask yourself honestly, what is trying to pull your attention away right now? Not later. Right now. What thought keeps interrupting your focus? What feeling keeps urging you to disengage? That is not random. It is revealing. You are not being attacked because you are failing. You are being targeted because you are close. Close to seeing something clearly. Close to choosing something differently. Close to stepping out of a pattern that has kept you contained. The enemy does not fight what is going nowhere. He fights momentum. And something in you has begun to move. Distraction wants to interrupt that movement before it becomes decision. Before decision becomes action. Before action becomes transformation. That is the window he aims for. The space between awareness and response. Do not underestimate how powerful it is to stay present right now. To keep listening even when it would be easier to disengage. To resist the urge to soften what you are feeling. To let the discomfort sharpen you instead of send you running. This part of the message is not here to accuse you. It is here to expose the strategy so it loses its grip. Once you see how distraction works, you can choose differently. And choice restores authority. You are not powerless in this moment. You are aware. And awareness gives you the ability to stay. To listen. To remain open even when resistance whispers. What comes next will challenge the distractions directly. It will name what they are trying to hide. And it will require your full attention. That is why this warning matters now. Stay present. Because clarity is closer than the noise wants you to believe. What is coming is not chaos. It is not destruction. It is not something to fear. But it will shock you because it exposes what has been hidden in plain sight. The shock is not in the event itself. It is in the realization. A realization of how close you were to missing this moment. The realization of how near you came to walking past something that was meant to change you. The shock is awareness arriving all at once. Many people expect divine moments to arrive loudly, with signs and spectacle. But often, the most powerful shifts happen quietly, internally, without announcement. And when they happen, people look back and say, if I had delayed just a little longer, I would not be here. That is the kind of shock this moment carries. What is coming is a narrowing, a sharpening, a moment where things that once felt confusing suddenly feel clear. Not easy, but clear. And clarity is shocking when you have lived in fog for a long time. Clarity removes excuses. It removes the comfort of uncertainty. It shows you what is real and what hath been tolerated. This is why the timing matters. Because clarity does not always come gently. Sometimes it arrives like a sudden light turned on in a dark room. You see everything at once. The mess, the path, the truth. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Jesus often brought this kind of shock. Not by yelling, but by speaking one sentence that rearranged everything. People walked away changed, not because he forced them, but because truth had cornered them. That is what is happening now. Not emotionally, spiritually. What is coming is the collapse of illusion. The illusion that delay is safe. The illusion that neutrality is harmless. The illusion that you can remain undecided without consequence. These illusions have been comfortable, but they have also kept you contained. The shock will be realizing how much energy you have spent maintaining distance from a decision you already knew you would have to make. How much effort went into avoidance. How many inner negotiations were held just to stay where you are. And with that realization comes a choice. Not forced, not rushed, but unavoidable. This is the moment where many people feel exposed, not because they are being judged, but because truth has removed their hiding places. When excuses fall away, you are left with honesty. And honesty is confronting, but it is also freeing. You may feel a sense of grief when this clarity hits. Not grief over loss, but grief over time. Time spent circling. Time spent postponing. Time spent knowing but not responding. That grief is not meant to crush you. It is meant to release you. Because mourning what was lost opens space for what can still be gained. This is also where hope quietly enters. Not loud hope, not emotional hype, but steady hope. The kind that says, I still have time to choose differently. The kind that understands that awareness itself is a gift. The shock is realizing that God has been closer than you thought, that He hath been speaking more clearly than you admitted, that the distance you felt was not because He withdrew, but because you hesitated. And here is the most unexpected part of all. With clarity comes peace. Not instant relief, but grounded peace. The peace that comes when inner conflict begins to resolve. When you stop pretending you don't know what you know. When alignment begins even before circumstances change. This is why this moment matters so deeply. Because shocks like this do not come often. They are mercy disguised as intensity. They are course corrections offered before drift becomes permanent. You are not being pushed off a cliff. You are being stopped at the edge. And right now, heaven is watching not with condemnation, but with attention. Attention to how you respond to clarity. Attention to whether awareness becomes action, or fades back into noise. Receive this blessing now, because it seals this moment of revelation. Type I choose clarity in the comments if you feel this awakening inside you. Blessing code 846 is now activated, releasing discernment, courage, and peace over your next decision. And stay with this, because what comes next connects clarity to action. You will be glad you stayed for what is about to be revealed. What you just experienced was light breaking through, and light is meant to travel. When you give in this moment, you become a carrier of that light into lives that are still waiting for clarity. The Lord says He multiplies the seed that is released in obedience, and right now He is speaking to you. I feel led to say this clearly. Your giving becomes a prophetic response, not a transaction. Do not let this moment pass. Act while your heart is awake. Release your support now through Super Thanks, channel membership, or PayPal. The links are in the description, and the PayPal QR code is on your screen. I speak blessing over every giver, that what you sow today will return as alignment, provision, and divine peace. Obey now, and let heaven move with you. Everything now narrows to response. Not emotion, not agreement. Response. This is the point where awareness demands movement, where clarity presses for action, where what you do next determines what happens after this moment fades. Because moments like this are not sustained by feeling, they are sealed by decision. Heaven has already spoken. You have already recognized it. The shock has passed into clarity. Now the weight shifts onto you, not in condemnation but in responsibility. Because once you see clearly, staying still is no longer neutral. Stillness after clarity becomes a choice of its own. Jesus never chased people after moments like this. He let them choose. not because he didn't care, but because forced obedience produces compliance, not transformation. He always allowed truth to stand on its own weight. And now truth is standing in front of you. Your response does not have to be dramatic. It has to be honest. It has to be intentional. It has to be real. Heaven is not looking for perfection. It is looking for alignment. Alignment begins with a decision that says, I will no longer pretend I didn't hear this. Some people think response means having everything figured out. It doesn't. It means choosing direction even when details are unclear. It means stepping forward without guarantees. It means valuing obedience more than comfort. This is where many people hesitate again. Not because they don't believe, but because belief now costs something. Comfort, control, familiar patterns. And the mind starts bargaining. I'll respond later. I'll pray about it. I need more confirmation. But often, confirmation has already been given. What remains is courage. Your response today shapes tomorrow's clarity. Obedience unlocks understanding, not the other way around. If you wait to feel fully ready, you will wait forever. Readiness often comes after the step, not before it. This is also where public acknowledgement matters. Not for attention, but for accountability. When you respond outwardly, you reinforce inward commitment. When you stay silent, it becomes easier to drift back into old patterns. That is why action is woven into this moment. If this message has spoken to you, do not keep it contained. Pause and like this video, not as habit, but as a marker that you chose to respond instead of scroll past. Share it with someone you know is standing at a crossroads, because obedience multiplies impact. Subscribe to the channel so you stay connected to what God continues to unfold, because consistency protects clarity. And write a comment that says, I choose to respond, not for others, but as a witness between you and heaven. These are not empty gestures. They are alignment points. Small but intentional. And heaven honors intention when it is paired with action. Your response today also determines what happens next spiritually. When you choose obedience, resistance weakens. When you choose alignment, confusion loosens its grip. When you choose response, intimacy deepens. God does not reveal the next step to spectators. He reveals it to participants. You may feel fear rising right now. That is normal. Fear often shows up when old patterns are threatened. But fear does not mean stop. It means something is changing. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to move anyway. Ask yourself honestly, what does response look like for you today? Not tomorrow. Not someday. Today. Is it a conversation you've been avoiding? A habit you need to release? A direction you need to stop delaying? A prayer you need to pray sincerely instead of safely? Response is specific. It touches real life. It costs something. And that cost is often the very thing that has been keeping you stuck. Do not underestimate how powerful one aligned decision can be. Lives change direction through single moments of obedience. Futures open because someone said yes when it was uncomfortable. And distance closes when response replaces hesitation. This is also where retention matters, not for content, but for transformation. What follows builds on your response. And if you disengage now, you interrupt the process mid-turn. Some truths only make sense after commitment. Some clarity only comes after obedience. So stay with this. Stay attentive. Stay open. Hold on, because what comes next connects your response to real consequences and real hope. You will be glad you stayed for what is about to be revealed. This is your moment to choose. and heaven is paying attention, not with pressure but with expectation. When you accept the call, truly accept it, not emotionally but intentionally, something begins to shift that you may not immediately see but you will feel. The first change is subtle. It is not fireworks. It is not instant perfection. It is relief. Not the kind that makes life easy, but the kind that quiets the inner resistance that has exhausted you for so long. The war inside you begins to lose its grip. Acceptance does not mean everything around you changes overnight. It means everything within you starts to realign. And alignment is powerful. When you stop fighting what you already know to be true, your energy returns. Your clarity strengthens. Your prayers stop feeling like they are hitting a ceiling. That is not coincidence. That is consequence, in the best sense of the word. When you accept the call, confusion does not instantly disappear, but it no longer controls you. You may still have questions, but they are no longer paralyzing. Fear may still speak, but it no longer decides. The voice of fear weakens when it is no longer obeyed, and the voice of God grows clearer when it is honored. This is one of the first rewards of acceptance, peace without explanation. Not because everything is resolved, but because you are no longer divided within yourself. Division drains strength. Unity restores it. And unity begins the moment you stop negotiating with truth. Many people expect acceptance to feel heavy, like loss. But what most discover is that resistance was heavier, carrying delay, carrying indecision, carrying internal conflict. Those burdens slowly crush joy and clarity. Acceptance lifts them, not all at once but steadily. Another change follows quickly, discernment. When you accept the call, you begin to see more clearly what belongs in your life and what does not. Certain distractions lose their appeal. Certain habits feel uncomfortable instead of familiar. Certain relationships require honesty you previously avoided. This is not punishment. It is pruning. And pruning always precedes growth. Jesus never called people without changing their direction. Not to restrict them, but to free them. Acceptance always leads to movement. You cannot say yes to God and stay exactly where you are. Something shifts. Something releases. Something begins to move forward. This is where many people are surprised. They thought acceptance would shrink their life. Instead, it expands it. Not outwardly at first, but inwardly. Your capacity grows. Your courage deepens. Your tolerance for compromise weakens. And that is a gift. When you accept the call, old patterns begin to break. Not because you fight them harder, but because they lose authority. Patterns only rule where agreement exists. When agreement is withdrawn, patterns collapse. Slowly but surely. You may also notice resistance around you increasing for a moment. Not because you made the wrong choice, but because alignment disrupts systems that benefited from your hesitation. When you change internally, external reactions often follow. Do not mistake resistance for failure. It is often confirmation that something real has shifted. Acceptance also brings responsibility. Not the kind that overwhelms, but the kind that grounds you. You become more aware of your choices, more intentional with your time, more honest with yourself. That awareness is not meant to burden you. It is meant to protect you from drifting back into patterns that once held you. Another outcome of acceptance is restored intimacy. Prayer becomes conversation again, not obligation. Scripture feels alive instead of distant. Silence feels safe instead of empty. These are signs of reconnection, signs that distance is closing. But hear this clearly. Acceptance is not a finish line, it is a beginning, a door, not a destination. It opens the path forward, but walking the path still requires daily response. One yes does not replace future obedience. It empowers it. There will still be moments of doubt, moments of weakness, moments where old habits try to return. That does not mean acceptance failed. It means growth is happening. Growth is messy before it is visible. The difference now is that you will recognize when something is off more quickly. You will feel misalignment sooner. And you will be able to correct course before drift becomes distance again. That is maturity. And maturity is one of the quiet rewards of obedience. If you have accepted the call in your heart, even imperfectly, know this: heaven responds to sincerity, not performance. God is not measuring how flawless your response is. He is honoring the direction of your heart. And what comes next will build on this acceptance. It will show you how to walk forward without returning to old patterns. How to remain aligned when life tries to pull you back. How to protect what has begun. This is not the end of the message. It is the beginning of movement. And movement, once started, changes everything. This is the final warning. Not because God is finished speaking, but because moments of invitation do not remain open indefinitely. There comes a point where love stops persuading and begins honoring the choice that has been made. That is not cruelty. That is respect. And this is the weight carried in this moment right now. A final warning does not sound like anger. It sounds like clarity. It sounds calm, steady, and unmistakable. It does not rush you, but it does not follow you forever either. It simply stands before you and tells the truth plainly. What you choose now will shape what you experience next. Jesus gave warnings like this often, and they were always wrapped in love. He never threatened people into obedience. He revealed consequences and trusted them to choose. That is what makes this moment sacred. You are being trusted with awareness, trusted with truth, trusted with the weight of your own response. This warning is not saying God will abandon you. It is saying intimacy cannot be forced. Closeness cannot be coerced. Sensitivity cannot be preserved without response. When people consistently ignore the voice of God, they do not lose His love. They lose their ability to recognize it. That is the real danger. Not punishment, not rejection. What dulls? A heart that no longer feels stirred. A spirit that no longer recognizes when heaven draws near. That is what happens when warnings are repeatedly dismissed. And that is why this moment matters so much. This is love making one last appeal before becoming silent. Not absent, but silent. Because silence is sometimes the consequence of being unheard too often. And silence is harder to reverse than discomfort. A warning is simple. Do not confuse mercy with delay. Mercy gives you time to respond, not permission to ignore. And every act of mercy carries a window. When the window closes, God does not change, but access does. Many people live their lives assuming there will always be another moment like this. Another nudge. Another interruption. Another wake-up call. But that assumption is not promised. Scripture and experience both show that God speaks clearly, then waits. And if waiting is met with avoidance, He allows people to continue in the direction they choose. That direction is not always destructive. Sometimes it is just more, quieter, less alive, less connected. People settle into routine faith, distant prayer, and muted conviction, not realizing they have adjusted to absence. This warning is here to prevent that settling. You are being shown the line. not to frighten you, but to make you aware that it exists. Lines are crossed unintentionally more often than intentionally. And once crossed, returning requires far more effort than staying would have. This is not meant to pressure you into panic. Panic cloud the judgment. This is meant to bring sobriety. Sobriety sees clearly. It weighs honestly. It chooses intentionally. Ask yourself this, without fear and without excuses. If nothing changed after today, would you be okay with that? If this clarity faded and life returned to normal, would that be acceptable? If this moment passed and you went back to postponing obedience, would you be at peace? Your honest answer matters. Because peace that avoids truth is temporary. Peace that aligns with truth lasts. This warning is wrapped in love because love wants your good, not your comfort. And your good sometimes requires discomfort now to prevent regret later. Regret is far heavier than obedience ever was. You are not being asked to do everything. You are being asked not to ignore this, not to minimize it, not to file it away as interesting or emotional. This is a real moment of alignment being offered to you. Final warnings are not given to hopeless cases. They are given to those who still have time. The fact that you are hearing this means you are not beyond reach. But it also means you are close enough to drifting that heaven is speaking clearly. Do not let familiarity with spiritual language soften the impact of what is being said. This is not a general message. It is a personal one. And personal messages always require personal response. There is no condemnation in this warning. Only truth. Truth that says the door is still open, but it will not remain open forever. Truth that says love is still reaching, but it will not always plead. Truth that says you are seen, valued, and invited, but not forced. What you do with this truth matters. Not emotionally. Practically. Intentionally. The next part will close this message not with fear, but with hope, with assurance, with clarity about how to move forward without losing what has begun. But this warning must land first, because hope without honesty becomes illusion, and love without truth becomes sentiment. Stay with this. Let it settle. Because how you hold this moment determines what the next one becomes. This is where the weight lifts, not because the message was light, but because truth has done its work. What you have heard was not meant to leave you anxious or afraid. It was meant to bring you home to clarity, to alignment, to peace that is rooted instead of temporary. The closing of this message is not an ending. It is a settling, a grounding, a quiet assurance that you are not alone in what comes next. Everything you have felt up to this point, urgency, conviction, clarity, even discomfort, served one purpose: to bring you to an honest place with God and with yourself. Not a dramatic place, not a performative place, an honest one. Because honesty is where healing begins, where direction becomes clear, and where faith stops being theoretical and starts becoming lived. You are not being left to figure things out on your own. The same Jesus who reached you in warning is the one who now offers assurance. His tears are not the final word. His love is. And love does not withdraw after confrontation. It stays to guide, to strengthen, to walk with you forward. If you have chosen to respond, even quietly, even imperfectly, that response has already shifted something. Heaven does not wait for flawless obedience. It responds to sincere surrender. The smallest real yes carries more weight than the loudest delayed intention. You may wonder what happens now. Now, you walk forward one step at a time, not rushing, not forcing outcomes, but staying aligned, staying sensitive, Staying responsive. The goal is not intensity, it is consistency. The goal is not emotional highs, it is steady obedience. You will still face choices. You will still hear competing voices. But you are no longer unaware. And awareness changes everything. You now recognize when distraction tries to pull you away. You recognize when delay disguises itself as wisdom. You recognize when comfort competes with calling. That recognition is protection. Peace does not mean the absence of challenge. It means the absence of inner division. And that is what is being restored now. A sense of wholeness, of integrity, of walking in one direction instead of being pulled in many. This is the assurance you need to hear. God is not disappointed in you. He is present with you. He is not measuring how quickly you change, but how honestly you walk. Growth is not instant, but it is real when direction is true. You are allowed to move forward without fear of being rejected for imperfection. Your race does not disappear because you stumble. It disappears only when you stop listening. And right now, you are listening. Let this message end where it began, not with urgency but with intimacy, with the knowledge that you were reached because you are valued, warned because you are loved, and invited because your story is not finished. Carry this forward quietly if you must, but carry it faithfully. Protect what has begun by staying responsive. When you feel the nudge, answer. When you feel conviction, don't delay. When clarity comes, act gently but firmly. That is how closeness is preserved. Receive this final blessing now as a seal over everything you have heard. Type "I walk in alignment" in the comments if you choose to move forward with awareness and obedience. Blessing code 602 is now activated, releasing peace, consistency, and divine guidance over your life. And now, as this message closes, understand this: you did not lose him. You did not miss the moment. You stayed. You listened. And because you did, the door remains open, not endlessly but intentionally. Walk through it with confidence. Heaven is with you. What you just experienced is not meant to stop with you. It is meant to flow through you. When you give in this moment, you are sowing into lives that are still waiting for this same clarity and hope. God says that those who water others will themselves be refreshed, and I speak that promise over you now. Hear this personally. I am inviting you to partner with this work as an act of obedience, not obligation. Do not delay what God is prompting. Move while your heart is aligned. Release your support now through Super Thanks, channel membership, or PayPal. The links are in the description and the PayPal QR code is on screen. I bless every giver with peace, provision, and spiritual covering. Act now, and let your obedience become a doorway for someone else's awakening.